FingerLakes1.com. I'm Josh Durso, and this is Inside the FLX. It's Sunday, February 3rd, and that means it's time for another Sunday conversation. This week, we caught up with two grassroots organizers and activists who've made preserving the region's environment their mission and priority. Joseph Campbell and Yvonne Taylor, co-founders of Gas-Free Seneca and Seneca Lake Guardian, a Waterkeeper affiliate, were in studio talking about a big win in 2018 and all of the environmental issues on their radar this year. We covered a lot of ground in our conversation, which lasted nearly an hour. It's a testament to just how many environmental issues have been getting coverage over the last several years here in the Finger Lakes. But before we get to that conversation, a reminder to those listening to Inside the FLX, we want to know what's on your mind, and we're exploring new ways to find and build future episodes. So if there's an issue or person you'd like to see a program built around, let us know by commenting or sending us a message on any of our connected platforms. You can also drop me an email directly. That's josh@fingerlakes1.com. Without further ado, my chat with Joseph Campbell and Yvonne Taylor of Seneca Lake Guardian. So welcome back to the program, guys. It's been a while. I think it's been like a year and a half now since the last time you two were in. Obviously, a ton has happened. You guys had probably the best year in 7 or 8 of them in 2018.
We sure did.
Yes, we're it still doesn't seem real sometimes.
Okay, so that. I think that was the first thing I wanted to ask the both of you was just how have you had to pinch yourself once or obviously there were 2 big decisions last year. Obviously the DEC made their decision and then the clock ran out on the appeal, and at both of those times was it is this real? Is this really happening?
Yeah, and the interesting thing is the deadline for them to file their appeal of the DEC commissioner's ruling was actually Christmas Eve. Mm-hmm. And the deadline came and went and they didn't file. And so we thought, well, what a great Christmas present for the Finger Lakes.
So all the advocacy, all of the fight, obviously the energy that you two have been putting into this, obviously the whole group has been putting into this because it's a pretty large coalition that you guys have behind you now.
Yeah.
What is the 24th, is that December 24th? That was the official date?
Mm-hmm.
It
Yes.
comes and it goes. Was there an element of just kind of surprise that there wasn't an appeal or an attempt to unwind what had happened?
We were pretty confident that they weren't going to file an Article 78. We just wanted that day to come and go quietly without incident, and it did. And I mean, it does feel a little surreal. I mean, we've dedicated every single day of our lives for nearly 9 years to this fight. And we were all kind of looking at each other like, well, what are we going to do now? But of course there's lots to do still. So
I have to ask, the low and the high point, looking back at that 8-9 year journey that you guys are talking about, is there a particular moment that sort of stands out as the low and the high point when you guys sort of look back at it and look at all the hard work that went into it?
Well, obviously, when they didn't file the Article 78 against the DEC, which our attorneys have told us that the DEC has never lost an Article 78 lawsuit, would have to be the high point. Really, I think even more exciting for me was when our attorneys called and told us that DEC Commissioner Basil Sagos had announced that they weren't going to issue permits for the LPG storage. Low points, God.
There were so many. It was such a roller coaster ride all the way through. I mean, there were so many moments where we thought, oh, we're not going to, there's no way we're going to win this fight. Especially early on when, we didn't have such a strong coalition, and Crestwood just tried their best to discredit us and call us different names, to categorize us as Ithaca liberals or the wine and brie crowd, and they just were trying so hard to make us irrelevant. And those were some low points for me. And then as we continued to grow and we spread our network, and we just got so much stronger, and we got the pro bono legal representation from Earth Justice, those were some of the high points for me too. And of course, as Joseph says, the day that Deborah Goldberg from Earth Justice called us, we were both out picking raspberries, and we got a phone call, and
Not a bad phone call to get.
not a bad phone call to get. We were both kind of laughing and crying at the same time, and jumping up and down in the middle of the woods. And yeah, it did feel surreal.
And then there was kind of a spontaneous. We started calling people, the people that were really invested and had been over the years, and giving them the news. And then there was a kind of a spontaneous gathering at one of our earliest supporters in the business community was Damiani Wine Cellars, and people just showed up there, spontaneously, and it was laughing, it was crying, it was hugs, and it was pretty amazing.
So before we talk about anything else, the juggernaut of a coalition that you guys have formed, I have sort of done a little bit of digging, trying to find something comparable in New York State in general, and I don't think there is a better organized grassroots group, frankly, anywhere. And I'm kind of curious, just having, you guys were the ones who really pushed this along and got this going. How much of an asset is that now as you start to look forward at all of the other things that you're going to have to take on, obviously, since multi-pronged effort, obviously, with the environment?
It's invaluable. It really is. And, when we're going to talk about some of the issues coming up, what used to take us 2 years to accomplish now takes us 2 weeks, because we've got this strong coalition. We don't have to beg people to, sign on to a letter or, oppose a project. They trust us. We've got credibility. We've proven that we know what we're doing for the most part. We've learned a lot along the way. And so things are much easier now.
Mm-hmm.
For
the
us.
Numbers. Give us a rundown of what some of the numbers are. How many businesses, how many people are we talking about signed on? It's in the hundreds, right? At least.
I think the
close to 500 businesses.
Yeah, across two coalitions. Ours is officially our Gatsby Seneca Lake Guardian Business Coalition, and then the Finger Lakes Wine Business Coalition. There's a lot of overlap between those two groups, but we have some that they don't, a lot that they don't. They have some that we don't, but the total is about 500 small and medium-sized businesses across the entire Finger Lakes region. Not just around Seneca Lake. Mm-hmm. We've got businesses from Rochester to Syracuse to Corning and Elmira, Binghamton. We've even got a couple of businesses down in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
Does that speak to the urgency of preserving not just Seneca Lake, but the Finger Lakes as a whole, as sort of that destination, a really unique asset that the state has?
Absolutely. And when it was all said and done with the gas storage fight, we also had 32 municipalities, including the city of Rochester, Syracuse, the village of Skaneateles. So, the entire Finger Lakes, representing 1.2 million New York residents. So we feel like now we're talking across the lakes to one another, whereas before it used to be one lake was worried about one issue and another was worried about another. And we realized that we have a Finger Lakes brand that people have worked generations to create. And if something bad happens in one part of the Finger Lakes, it impacts all of us. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a first. And we're just super excited about it. And we think it's going to serve us well in the future while we, combat other issues that are threatening the Finger Lakes.
So you teed it up for me. So what's next? See, the reason why I want to ask it like this is because there isn't just one thing that's next or that could be next. There's 4 or 5, maybe 6 different things that could be next. So what is next, or what does the focus now shift to, that energy?
Well, we're still because we started out focusing on LPG storage on Seneca Lake. We're still focused mainly on issues threatening Seneca Lake, but then now we're going to, hopefully bring our organizational skills to branch out and go to other lakes, because other lakes have problems. We've got problems that go across the Finger Lakes.
Right.
All 11 Finger Lakes, I believe, have now had harmful algal blooms. Mm-hmm. Right. So there's threats to individual lakes, and there's threats to the entire Finger Lakes region. Mm-hmm. That we can, hopefully marshal the resources to combat. Things like what we're going to talk about next, probably.
Yeah, which is interestingly enough that pesky incinerator issue. We filed our final paperwork for the gas storage issue on November 14th of 2018. Yeah. 2 days later, we thought, okay, we're done. We can take a breath.
No.
Enjoy the holidays, maybe, like normal people.
No.
2 days later, we learned about this proposal to bring 3,000 additional tons of garbage a day into the Finger Lakes region by truck now, and then later by train. And this would not be in place of the 10,000 tons of garbage we're already receiving in this region that go to the landfill. So this is an additional 3,000 that's coming to the Finger Lakes, or would, and they would burn it at the Seneca Army Depot in Romulus, which sits squarely between Seneca and Cayuga Lakes. Only 3,200 feet away from Romulus K through 12 school, not far away from Hillside Residential Center, where many at-risk youth reside. And, when you're burning garbage, even with the state-of-the-art technology, that smokestack, which is 260 feet tall, as Joseph mentioned, is going to be emitting some very toxic chemicals, like dioxin, which is the most toxic substance known to man, lead, furan, mercury. A lot of these things bioaccumulate in the body and cause irreparable harm. They get into the meats and the fish that we consume, the dairy products that we consume. And, even with, again, as I said, they say that they've made these incinerators very efficient, and they're not harmful, of course. That's what they claim. But even with the state-of-the-art smokestacks, you still have residual ash that is produced when you burn. And the cleaner the smokestack, the more toxic the ash. And that ash has to go somewhere, and it would probably end up in our landfills, where it would blow around in the air, seep into the groundwater. So it's just a horrible idea. And the only other thing I want to say really quickly is that, with the gas storage issue, barring the trucks and the trains and all the, the noise that would be associated with that, the risks were what if? What if there's an accident? What if the caverns are unstable? With this incinerator, it's what will be. Mm-hmm. It's not a what if. It's this thing is going to be emitting 1 million tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere every year. That's a what's going to happen. That's definite. Mm-hmm. And, here we are in a global climate crisis, and we're going to be emitting that kind of greenhouse gas into the atmosphere in the Finger Lakes every year. It's just, the only people that are in favor of it are the developers.
So one of my personal observations was that I kept seeing the word, and you used it, efficient, instead of safe, which seemed telling for one reason or another. What do you make of? Is that just sort of is that the corporate way of sort of working your way around addressing what really people are worried about, which is the safety aspect of having a facility like that so nearby?
Yeah, I think
if it's safe, call it safe, right? If it's efficient, well, that's not really addressing anything.
Right. Well, they're the attorney for the company's called Circular Energy. They're a startup out of Rochester. They don't have any track record of doing anything, let alone incinerating 3,000 tons of garbage every day. He keeps saying that no, the stack's going to be 99.9% of the dioxin is going to be removed from the stack. Now, dioxin is one of the most toxic compounds known to man. There's no safe exposure level. Okay, so when you say 99.9% of the dioxin is going to be removed, but that doesn't give you any idea of, so how much dioxin is there that's going to, is left, and so how much of it is actually, it's going to emit dioxin. He's basically admitting it, but he's making it sound like, it's going to be so clean, we're going to use the latest technology and la-di-da. So are we talking, grams? Are we talking ounces? Are we talking pounds? Are we talking tons? Mm-hmm. They don't say. So we know that it's going to be emitting some dioxin along with the other nasty stuff, lead, mercury, sulfur dioxide. Some of these compounds are extremely harmful to agriculture, particularly grapes. And
then you can't forget about the fact that the Seneca Army Depot is also home to the largest white deer population in the world, right, and nesting bald eagles. There's that too. So,
and that K through 12
and 2 large water sources.
Right.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And, the wind doesn't always blow from one direction, but prevailing winds tend to be from the west here. And so Cayuga Lake is downwind, as is the K through 12 Romulus School. They'll be in the shadow of that 260-foot smokestack. It's the equivalent of a 26-story building, basically. And there's no 26-story building in Ithaca. There's no 26-story building in Syracuse. There may be one in Rochester. I'm not sure. But that's what we're talking about. That's going to be visible for miles.
So, can you imagine getting married at one of the beautiful sites in the Finger Lakes and having this trash train go by? One of the wineries or one of the parks.
Yeah, and they do.
Well, and I believe it was just within the last few weeks that the Finger Lakes region was named one of the top destinations. Again. Yeah. Every year it seems like there's a half dozen of those different surveys that come out that say, hey, Finger Lakes, you're doing something right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So the Article 10 process, it's complicated, it's convoluted. There is some legislation that might be kind of pushing this project away from the Article 10 process potentially, but before we get into that, where does it stand in the Article 10 process right now? Has Circular Energy moved at all on this, or is it still sort of in that pre-launch phase?
They've gotten to the point where they filed, and quite a long time ago, it's been 7-8 months, they filed what's called a public involvement participation plan, which lays out some of the steps they need to take before they can file the next part of the application.
Which I believe, if memory serves me correctly, was sent back or was requested to have amendments made to it to make it right?
Yeah, the Public Service Commission Siting Board sent it back and said you have to address this, and this. Uh-huh. Quite a long list, actually.
Yeah.
But the company did, and that was. It's not like the siting board looks at it. The DEC, when they're considering an application, will send a notice of incomplete application or NOIA, and they'll do that multiple times. To the applicant, for Crestwood, for instance. But they asked the company to address these issues. The company addressed those issues, and that was the end of that. So. the next step is for the company to fulfill some of the requirements of the participation plan, and so far they have not. And so we're basically in a holding pattern.
Surprising? Not surprised? Feel like this is kind of typical, or?
It's a little surprising. Mm-hmm. It's a little surprising, but it's okay with us, because the longer they delay, the greater the chances are that we can continue to, fight to stop it.
Well, plus they're embroiled in not one but two Article 78 lawsuits that they filed against the town of Romulus over some zoning issues, and those Article 78 lawsuits are also in limbo. We filed to be an intervener in that case. Ooh, how long ago was that?
It was summer.
So the Seneca County Supreme Court justice heard our arguments to become an intervener, and he was supposed to come back with a ruling, and hasn't yet. So those Article 78 lawsuits are in limbo as well. So
to that end, one of the questions that popped up on social while we were sort of prepping for this was, does that mean that the interest, or do you feel like that could mean that interest on the company side or on the corporate side just may not actually be there at this point to continue unless something drastically changes, or perhaps they see some sort of writing on the wall in terms of liability?
It's really tough to say, but having had some experience with a multi-billion-dollar corporation in the past, we're not willing to rest on our laurels, because you never know. They could submit something tomorrow. They could start announcing that they have their website and they have an office and they're going to have it, so we have to be diligent and we have to be prepared. So because if we end up in this Article 10 proceeding rather, we're talking about perhaps potentially another decade-long battle, very costly to the community. We're again going to be faced with having to hire expert witnesses. It's the same old, I hate to say it, the same old battle that we just went through. And I think that the Finger Lakes number one is a little weary from the gas storage fight. Not saying they're not going to fight as equally as hard, but
people only have so much in them.
Yeah, and I think it's I think what we're trying to do is prevent the Finger Lakes region and the Finger Lakes community, the families and the businesses in the Finger Lakes, from having to endure another decade-long battle, or be sitting at home thinking about this specter of this horribly dangerous, facility. It's already, unfortunately, putting a damper on real estate sales in the town of Romulus, additional investments in the town. So just the mere thought of having this is already hurting us. And we just don't need that. I mean, you wouldn't put a garbage burning facility in Napa Valley in California. So why they're even thinking about it here is beyond us. But
there's one other thing that may be in play that it's behind the scenes that we're not aware of. But one of the major investors in this facility was a gentleman named Jin Zhu. His real name is Zheng Zhu. He's a Chinese national, and he's been involved in investing in projects in Western New York, Central and Western New York, through a program called EB5. EB5 is basically a pay-to-play. You invest $500,000 to $1 million, and you basically get a green card. So you don't go through the immigration process like most normal immigrants do. And he's recently defaulted on an investment in a project somewhere outside of Rochester. I'm not sure exactly where that is. But so that doesn't bode well for the people with the deep pockets that might be financing this thing.
So obviously, there was some legislation proposed last year that would have removed this type of facility from prospective Article 10 process. Time kind of ran out. It was last minute, end of the session. Is that still on the path? Is that still an option this time around?
Absolutely, and we want to really give a shout out to Senator Pam Helming for championing the bill last year. She worked tirelessly with both the Senate and the Assembly.
And across the aisle.
And across the aisle to try and get this bill passed last session. Fortunately, it was unanimously passed in the Senate, but then last minute it got coupled with another unrelated bill and stalled out before the Assembly was able to vote on it and before the session ended. So fast forward to 2019, now we have a whole new legislature. Sadly for Senator Helming, the majority is now Democrat. And so we needed to find a new sponsor for the bill. Luckily, Senator Rachel Mayow from Syracuse is our sponsor for the bill in the Senate. The bill has a number. It's S-2270. And Senator Helming is the co-sponsor of that bill. And Assemblyman Michael Cusick is going to I believe he already has reintroduced the bill in the Assembly, and we're just waiting for a bill number. We also need to thank Assemblyman Phil Palmisano, because he is also championing the bill, and he's going to be a co-sponsor of the bill.
We believe, along with Assembly Minority Leader Brian Kolb out of Geneva, and
we've talked about it before here, and I believe I might have even asked you this question the last time you guys were in studio. The unity on an issue like this. How important is that to see that across the aisle, folks working together, no matter how imbalanced state politics may seem from time to time, just to see that sort of unity on one single issue, to just be like, this is definitively not good for the Finger Lakes?
Yeah, it's remarkable, really. It's very important. But everyone from Governor Cuomo, who issued a statement opposing it and saying he would work with the legislature if a bill was presented to him, as well as Senator Chuck Schumer. There's not an elected official or anyone that we're aware of that is in favor. Everybody's come out, publicly opposed this, no question about it.
So it sailed through the Senate once it landed in the Energy Committee, and a unanimous vote, and that was a Republican Senate. So we're really hopeful that the same group of senators will vote in favor of the Senate version this time around. We also believe that there's strong bipartisan support in the Assembly. So once it makes it to the floor for a vote, we expect similar results in the Assembly. And then once it passes both houses, it lands on the governor's desk for his signature, and we hope that he lives up to his statement that he's opposed to the incinerator and will consider a legislative solution.
I just want to say that even though it does appear as it would be a no-brainer to get this bill passed, we are asking everyone in the Finger Lakes region to please help us by calling their elected officials, contacting Assembly Speaker Carl Heastie, Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins. They're going to be critical players in helping get this through. It's not a cakewalk. We do need people to make some phone calls and really push this. It's unfinished business, really, from last year's session. Let's get it done. Let's get it done as swiftly as possible so that the Finger Lakes can take a big sigh of relief and realize that, things like dirty garbage incineration will be prohibited in the Finger Lakes watershed, not just in Romulus, but within the Finger Lakes watershed. It's an important bill, and quite frankly, once we get that passed, we'd like to work with other organizations throughout the state to ban incinerators statewide.
Mm-hmm. There are better solutions for the state's garbage. I mean, burning it is, and landfilling it. They're both not unsustainable solutions to solid waste management. I like to point out the solid waste management plan in Tompkins County as a good example of how to go about it the right way. They're taking 80% or more solid waste out of the stream and in reusing, recycling, composting, things like that. Mm-hmm. And if they can do it, then we can do it, and New York City can do it. Where most of this garbage is coming from, let's face it.
I was going to say, is that really at the root of when you guys sort of, if you're able to sort of take that next step and move past the incinerator, is that the issue, is really just getting the state to come up with a solid plan for how they're going to handle what really is mostly a New York City problem and not like a Finger Lakes problem, right, or a Seneca County problem?
Right, and it kind of harkens back to the whole gas storage thing. Well, they've got to store it somewhere. The garbage, they've got to put it somewhere. Well, if you think about it, that's really not a solution. Landfilling is not a solution. Garbage incineration is not a solution. The solution is, as Joseph pointed out, composting, recycling, reusing, reducing, producing packaging that is not single-use plastic, that doesn't need to go to a landfill. There's lots of different ways that you can produce packaging so it's not a single use. And I also think that another thing that Seneca Lake Guardian is working on with other organizations and other elected officials and stakeholders in the Finger Lakes is trying to become a model for the rest of the state on how to handle your refuse, because it's really time to get past burying it or burning it. Yeah,
and there's some folks, good friend of ours is on the Geneva City Council, is kind of spearheading a new initiative, and they're calling it the Vision for the Future. We want to close down Seneca Meadows. Their permits are going to run out. And the town of Seneca Falls, Local Law 3, which supports them closing by a certain date, right? Ontario County landfill is the next largest landfill, and they have a little more control over that because it's county owned, whereas Seneca Meadows is privately owned. So we're working to make sure that they close by their stated closure dates, and not go beyond that. Don't let them just keep spreading out and piling the garbage higher and higher. And
so landfills, is that where we sort of stand as being the most immediate and existential threat to the Finger Lakes, if not for an incinerator project that still is, in theory, it isn't actually something that's here and now?
Yeah, we're the garbage dump of New York State.
Yeah.
We're already taking more than 50% of all the solid waste that goes to landfills in the entire state, and most of it, I'll say, is coming from downstate. New York City generates an enormous amount of garbage, and they have to get rid of it. And they're trying everything they can to send it. They can't. They closed the largest landfill down in Fresh Kills landfill. They closed the incinerator down in it was on Long Island. So they have to do something with this garbage. Well, I think that if they're faced with we're not going to take your garbage anymore, after a certain number of years. That's how much time you have to get your act together and start doing, the right thing. It's just too easy for them to just, put it in the truck and send it to the Finger Lakes.
So I'm glad you brought that up. Do you think it would be easier? Obviously, the plastic bag ban is the thing that everybody is talking about right now. It's the thing that everybody's sort of connected to. The policy or the ideas that will make New York better in the long term, are they more connected to changing behavior, or is it more apt to removing these things from the situation completely so that people aren't even tempted in the first place? Because I feel like the plastic bag ban is kind of that. It's taking the thing away rather than trying to change people's behavior, because that can be a little bit hard.
Well, you have to do both.
Yes.
You have to do both. I mean, you have to. The packaging. When I go, I'll say it, when I go to Wegmans and I buy some organic chicken.
Mm-hmm.
The packaging is like, so we do our best to recycle.
Right.
But a lot of people don't. Most people don't. Most people just throw it in the garbage. Because
most people
easy.
have that attitude of, well, what is the little thing that I'm going to do contribute to this big mess that we have? Right.
Yep. But it's also I think the mindset of the municipality itself. For instance, I keep saying New York City. It's just garbage truck goes down the street, picks up the garbage, takes it to the the loading platform, and either goes on a train off to somewhere, or they pack them in trucks and ship them up, and they're driving. You go to the Waterloo exit off the Thruway and just watch one after another after another. It's like they're coming and they're going all day long, and it's insane.
It's awful. It's really awful, and I also think that producers of our products need to get on board, need to start being responsible, and I think we're starting to see that. You'll see a 6-pack of soda or beer now in a compostable holder. And I just heard the other day, and I can't remember which company, so I won't say, but they're now considering packaging ice cream in a stainless steel container that's reusable, for example, as opposed to something that's going to end up in the landfill. Or orange juice is now going to be sold in glass bottles instead of a plastic bottle, or so that's the kind of thing that we need to see a lot more of.
I just saw a story over in England. The milk ban's coming back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so I remember, I'm old enough to remember, going out on the porch and opening up the thing and pulling out the glass jugs of milk, and then you'd wash them out and you'd leave them for the guy when he,
Well, it seems like we're ripe to be in that sort of scenario again down the road, seeing as how Instacart and Amazon and delivery to your door is the thing. In 5 to 10, 15 years, we may not see traditional grocery stores much at all, other than Wegmans maybe. So obviously all of those issues, big, important. We've also got the former Seneca Army Depot popping back up on the radar.
That's right.
What, when, why, how? Obviously, Peter Mandius has done some great reporting.
Yes.
We've got that up, cataloged up on fingerlakes1.com. Check that out.
Yes.
Of course, he's been all over it, like he has most of the environmental issues.
We are so blessed to have him in our midst. Yeah, he's an amazing journalist.
So where do we stand right now? Obviously, the Army is going to be doing some work, but the DEC either is sort of out of the loop. Is that what we're feeling like right now?
Well, they're kind of slow walking things. So what they've discovered at the Seneca Army Depot is what they call PFAS, or polyfluoroalkyl substances. There's many different kinds that, I won't get into all the technical details. There's PFAS, PFOS, different types. But these things are found really all over in many different products. They're found in things like Teflon, Scotchgard, even certain kinds of dental floss, believe it or not.
That's reassuring.
Yeah, well, check your dental floss. But they don't break down in the body. They're responsible for life-threatening conditions, including cancer. They're, and we believe that the PFAS that they've discovered at the depot comes from firefighting foam.
Right.
So, here we are with contaminated sites at the Seneca Army Depot, where we've got dairy cattle grazing, corn crops growing. This is a big concern. And to our knowledge, the DEC has not informed the public of this yet, and the Department of Health has not. And right now, we think the most important thing is public information. The public needs to be informed.
Yep.
Our concern for Seneca Lake is the fact that the plume itself flows to the west, which heads right down into the lake. So we're very concerned about that. I mean, there's many things to be alarmed about here. There are other, places in the state and across the country that are experiencing contamination from this kind of substance. And in, for example, Hoosick Falls, New York, they're issuing a catch and release only warning for waters that have been impacted. In the state of Michigan, any deer that are culled from within a 5-mile radius of contamination are, they've issued a do not consume warning. So Seneca Lake Guardian has communicated with both the Department of Environmental Conservation and the Department of Health, asking them if they have done any kind of similar studies on the fish or the deer at the Seneca Army Depot, and we have yet to hear a response.
And just to give you an idea of how toxic this stuff is, and it's linked to different kind of cancers, and they measure this stuff in parts per trillion. Now most toxic substances are measured in parts per million. Sometimes you see parts per billion. This is parts per trillion, and the EPA advisory is 70 parts per trillion. But there's the State Water Quality Board has initiated changing our advisory with the Department of Health down to 10 parts per trillion. So this stuff is really, really toxic, and it doesn't go away.
Right.
It doesn't biodegrade or anything.
So with all of the things that we've talked about thus far, what is sort of, I want to get a good, concise sort of read for folks to one thing that they can sort of take away from this and be able to sort of put into action. What's one thing that with all of the issues environmentally that are facing the region, what's one thing that folks can just do to get involved and to potentially do some good or contribute a little bit to what obviously the broader move is? Well,
we're definitely going to ask people to pick up the phone and make phone calls, send emails, write letters. The most immediate thing for us is to get this legislation passed that'll ban incinerators in the Finger Lakes watershed. And we'll be posting that information on our website, senecalakeguardian.org, and our Facebook page, and they can follow us on Twitter. We're putting out messages on Twitter all the time. So check for that. Check our website.
Yes, sign up to get updates for email updates.
There's a form on our website where you can sign up for updates and
Very good.
Join our email list, which is already large, but we want to grow that.
And the other thing is that this is Seneca Lake Guardian is an all volunteer organization, but this stuff costs money, and it's not cheap. So donating to Seneca Lake Guardian would help us immensely in pursuing these endeavors and protecting the Finger Lakes from these kinds of threats.
And going forward, we are setting aside some money to do some testing of outflows near two large coal ash landfills. So we haven't talked about that.
Right.
There's one in Dresden on Seneca Lake, on the west shore of Seneca Lake, where the old coal-fired power plant they took the coal ash, which is also full of nasty stuff like lead and beryllium and thallium and radium 226 and 228. So they would take it and they would dig a pit and they would dump the stuff in this unlined pit. Precipitation in the form of rain or snow percolates down through the ash, picks up the nasty stuff, goes into the groundwater. Ultimately, where is it going to end up? Seneca Lake. Well, there's another one over on Cayuga Lake. So when I said earlier that we were branching out, we're very concerned about the coal ash landfill over in Lansing, which we know is some of the toxic compounds are making it into Cayuga Lake. So what we want to do is we want to do some localized testing, take water samples, send them to the lab, see what exactly is in there. The DEC requires them to test for certain substances, but there are a lot more that they don't require that EPA does require.
Right.
So we're going to test for those substances and find out exactly what it is that's going into the lakes from these coal ash landfills. Mm-hmm. And there's already precedent for in I believe it's Virginia. They're requiring Duke Energy to completely remove, I think so, I'd say it's 30 million tons of coal ash from these unlined landfills and process it and put it somewhere safe.
The obvious question of that is there anywhere safe, or is this similar to, you're just going to find a lesser terrible place to put it?
Probably a lesser terrible place. I think, that's one of the reasons why, we really need to get away from, burning coal. And there's problems with other fossil fuels too. We know that. So I think New York State's on the right track, moving toward, a renewable energy. 2030 might be unrealistic, but it's a goal, and we're actually pushing for the owner of the Seneca Army Depot. The majority of the Seneca Army Depot property has already expressed an interest in installing a solar farm, for instance, and he's talking about downgrading his original proposal. We want to upgrade it. There's some very large solar installations going in New York State right now, where they're talking about 1,000 acres of solar panels, generating 400 megawatts of electricity,
which would be equivalent to the
Guinea nuclear power plant.
Right.
That doesn't generate 400 megawatts. So, it's doable. It's going to take some time. It's going to take there again, you have to change people's attitudes. It's just, it's too easy to just.
It is, yeah. So my last question for you guys, moving forward, the one thing each of you are most optimistic about heading through the rest of 2019. I want to end on a positive note.
I'm most optimistic that we've got this momentum, we've got this coalition, and that I think pretty soon any dirty industrial developer who thinks even for a second of coming into the Finger Lakes with a project is going to go, maybe we shouldn't go there, because those people don't mess around, and they're not going to let us in without a terrible fight, and we're going to just be spending good money after bad. So I think that the word is out, don't mess with the Finger Lakes, and I feel pretty positive about that. One more thing I want to say really briefly is we wouldn't know half of the information that we know without the help of our research director, Marianne Kowalski, who is just the most amazing research person I've ever encountered in my life. And I'm pretty optimistic about working with her too. So
I would be too. Joseph?
Yeah, I think I echo what Yvonne said, that we have generated some momentum. We have the Finger Lakes region, and I think we can continue to build on that. Has already started thinking of themselves as a region, as opposed to Seneca Lake has, we're only worried about what happens here. KU Lake, we're only worried about what happens there. Cuca Lake, we're only worried about what happens there. So we're talking across lakes. We're talking across. It's becoming regional, and I think that's pretty exciting. The Finger Lakes region, when the Wine Spectator talks about one of the best places to go wine touring, and they don't talk about going to Seneca Lake. They talk about going to the Finger Lakes. So I love living here. I love the area. I love what it's become, and I love the potential. And there's really no place for industrial gas storage, incinerators, or anything else like that. So let's keep it pristine. Let's keep it clean. I like breathing clean air and drinking clean water.
We all do. Yvonne Taylor, Joseph Campbell, thank you both.
Josh,
thanks for having us, Josh.
Hey, thanks for making Inside the FLX a part of your week. I'd like to thank my guests, Joseph Campbell and Yvonne Taylor of Seneca Lake Guardian, for stopping by. Definitely check out the great work they're doing on environmental issues here in the Finger Lakes. It's really, really important stuff. Remember, new episodes of Inside the FLX are released every Thursday and Sunday exclusively here on FingerLakes1.com. The show is entirely listener and viewer supported, so that means you'll never have to pay to hear these conversations. There won't ever be a paywall or subscription prompt on FingerLakes1.com, so all we ask that you do in return is follow us on our social platforms and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you want to help the program continue to grow after an incredibly successful 2018, head over to the iTunes store on your iOS device and rate and review the podcast. Give it 5 stars and let us know what you want to see more of while you're there. It helps new listeners discover the show, and we love seeing your feedback. Hey, thanks for sticking around. We will see you next time, and until then, check FingerLakes1.com for the latest headlines from around the region. Bye now.